Hi, it's me again, coming at you with a regularly scheduled Unholy guide. Pinnacle of consistency, I would say, is a good way to describe this channel. No, I took a break. The design for DK as a whole, I wasn't super happy with. Maybe you can relate in some way. Also, the MMR deflation was a bit of a drag. A lot of my friends quit, so I was tough. But anyway, War Within is coming out soon, and the changes actually look really good. And I swear that's not just hopeless optimism, because a lot of those talent changes are already on Wowhead, so we get to see them concretely. And I mean, that's what I've been asking for a great deal of time. So I will be making a video on that, by the way, too. So if you're interested. Also, the Glad mount looks really cool. So anyway, I'm back. Moral of the story, you don't need to be bored by this. As you can see, I queued up some solo shuffles and we got the 2400. I think most people watching my videos are looking for solo shuffle legend or gladiator. I don't think many rank ones would need to watch my YouTube videos. I think they've already got it covered. So yeah, if a washed aging man can get it with this info, then you absolutely can as well. So let's just get into it. As always, I will go through gear, stats, embellishments, tier set, then talents, PvP talents, closing notes, and I'll get out of here. So let's do it. Another Unholy guide. Okay, so gear. We start with stats, and stats are very boring. You want Verse, Mastery, and Haste, and you want pretty much any combination of all three without going too much into one, because DRs exist in this game. So if you went all into Verse, like you just took every PvP piece and just had as much Verse as humanly possible, then it would be heavily DR'd and you wouldn't have enough of the other output stats to really get as much pressure as you want. So really, you're just going to be grabbing PvP pieces, conquest pieces, tier set pieces, and crafted pieces. And if you find yourself with too much versatility, then you can craft a piece like this, which is using the Missive of Fever Flare, which gives you haste and mastery and no verse. So that is how you bring your versatility down if it's getting too high and thus too DR'd. So again, that's a crafted piece with Missive of Fever Flare. That's haste mastery. So otherwise, you pretty much avoid crit at all costs wherever possible. You'll have a little bit of crit. We'll get to that in a second. And some combination of haste, mastery, and verse. You do not need exact numbers for that. I promise. There's nothing that those numbers would do for you. If you need something to shy away from, I think once you've got over 40% verse, you're so DR'd that you've probably got a little bit too much. So let's bring that down. Okay, so that's stats. Like I said, super boring, but super accurate. Let's go into tier set. Also a little boring. Here's why. If you look at the tier pieces, here's the tier legs. They have haste mastery. Here's the tier gloves. They have haste verse. Here's the tier shoulders. They have haste mastery. And finally, here's the tier helm. It has mastery crit, but the mastery is main stat. Therefore, 3 out of the 4 tier pieces are all BIS stats. And the only tier piece that isn't has crit off stat with a ton of mastery. So technically, it's still really, really good. Would you run that? Duh. I mean, so obviously, yes, right? You get 3 out of 4 BIS pieces. The 4th is near BIS. And then you get for free, you get an additional Magus. You get Magus of the Dead Cleaves. You get extended duration of them. And then you also get amplified damage from them. All for effectively nothing. You don't sacrifice anything, right? So there's your 4 set. One more time, that's helm, shoulders, legs, and gloves. Super boring, but super accurate. No chest. Okay, embellishments. This part should be fun. And I do mean that. I'm going to give you 2 entirely separate embellishment builds, so to speak, and you can run either one. The first one, excitingly, is Fire DK, right? I know if you've been around PvP, you've seen the Fire Ring. I'm going to hover over that right now in my bags to show you what I mean. The Seal of Diran is chosen. This goes all the way up to 535. All the stats and, of course, the proc all go up with that item level, which means it goes higher than regular PvP gear, which means anybody with fire damage is running this thing. But you can actually get fire damage even if you don't have it naturally in your kit. And how you can do that is with the Shadow Flame embellishment and the Legendary Axe. The Legendary Axe actually has a proc. While it's nerfed in PvP, it does fire damage, and the fire damage will proc the ring, and it's also just free damage. The entire last season, people were asking, do you run the axe? And a lot of the time it was like, if you have it, use it, but you don't have to go out of your way to get it. That ended up being very true because they were so close that plenty of people got rank 1 with the axe, plenty of people got it with the regular weapon. So that means if it was that competitive, now that it can do that and proc the damage ring that goes to 535, that actually makes it a little bit more competitive. So if you put on double Shadow Flame embellishment, that's the Shadow Flame patch, the legendary axe, which I don't have, so I'll be making a follow-up video with some gameplay with it, and that's going to be super fun. And then a maxed out, of course you need it to be maxed out, but once you have it maxed out, Seal of Diran is chosen, then you will have a fire package where you get an extra amount of pad damage, which is great this season because we just got a bunch of buffs to our pad. So the more damage, the better. It kind of feels like Gatiku's or Gushing Wound, right? And you remember how good that was. You're going to have that. You're going to have all that fire damage, and then you're going to use that fire damage to proc more fire damage, and it's both your weapon and your ring are higher item level than your PvP pieces. So you get extra strength and stamina, which is survivability. It's a fun package. I have some games. Let me show you. I need a longer one, so let's see if I have something. Oh, I was playing 2s, so I'm not sure any of these are going to be long. But it doesn't matter, because look at that. That's what I wanted to show anyway. It does more than 4% of your damage. And in longer games, it's even higher, right? Because it's a consistent sustained damage proc, right? So it gets closer to 5% of your damage. 5% of your damage is a lot. If you do some math, and I did, on what the stat embellishments are giving you, it generally would be around 2% damage worth of stats. So 2 plus 2, because you can have 2 embellishments, is 4. And this is doing 4.3. You can see it right on the screen. But in longer games, it gets closer to 5. Which means the Shadow Flame embellishment, realistically, is just as much of a contributor, if not more, in a PvP environment, because you really like that pad, that chip damage, the sustained damage. It's just as much or more of a contributor to your damage than the other stat embellishments are. But what's crazy is it's also going to proc that ring. So it just gets additional benefit by combining with the legendary axe to give you this fire package. Anyway, like I said, this was definitely not going to be as boring. That's a lot of words to take in, but the idea is Shadow Flame, legendary axe, Diran is chosen, is competitive. Now I know, I've been beating around the bush. You know, you want to know where do you even get this thing if you haven't heard of it. Let me hover over it again one time for you. There's the other ring. Seal of Diran is chosen. So you grab these items that you can get from LFR, just pop in an LFR and then loot the boss and you'll get these. And then you can go to the vendor near the tier set vendor. It's a little dragon, the vault vendor, and you can just buy this. That's it. Then the currency you get either comes from Mythic Zeros, then Mythic Pluses, or 1400 in PvP, then 1600 in PvP, and you have to slowly upgrade it with this upgrader guy over here until it gets to 535. But once it is, it's just higher than your other pieces, and it provides a really powerful proc. And yes, if you're running that entire fire package and you manage to spend the time to upgrade this all the way to 535, you will definitely put on both. And that is the complete fire package. Because this gives you a tiny shield. It is nerfed in PvP. It is not that much. But the stats are BIS. They're premium stats. You get 535. So you get premium stats, higher item level, and a free shield. Is the shield great? No. But you get it for free. So that is the fire package. I know, dense material, but I like to be thorough. That is the legendary axe with a fire proc, double Shadow Flame for fire procs, and double ring. And this fire proc will proc that fire proc. And they will all funnel together as an engine of free damage and free healing. Seems pretty good, right? But it might be too much for you. Maybe you're like, well, I saw a guide that use the boots, right? On proc CC boots, right? We've been talking about them from the very beginning. They're the PvP boots that give you primary stat when you stun somebody, and Lariat, because that gives you proc stats. If you do those two things, don't get any of the fire package because it's not going to work, right? So if you want the fire engine, do it all. Don't half-ass it. I will be slowly getting all of those pieces, and I will make a update video with everything fully upgraded, legendary fully upgraded, rings fully upgraded, if I can get it before the end of the season. And I will show you how much it contributes to my damage and healing. I will be making it. But if you want to go with the basic, that is embellished boots, embellished lariat. That gives you your proc stats, free of charge, right? Just very basic. So those are the two embellishments that you can use. Other than that, put on Fallen Crusader in your weapon and enchant your gear the way we've been doing it all expansion. I can't go over that again. I'm sure you know where the enchants are by now. Okay. Talents. Should be pretty fun. Let me start with the build that everybody knows, because I think it was used all last season. Defile with short APOC and many Maguses and Bursting Swords. So you go down Unholy Blight and Defile to get Defile. Defile gives you a mastery buff and cleaves with Scourge Strike, cleave Bursting Wounds, which gets quadratic scaling with Bursting Swords. And it gives you just extra damage because Defile is more damage. It grows a little bigger if they stay in it, which is really nice. And it's only got a 20-second cooldown. So this is really big button with a lot of things baked into one. And it's funny, Defile has been in the game for so long, but it has really almost never been playable until like these last few seasons. So last couple of seasons, I should say. So you get Defile. You go down this line, which is pretty much all worthless talents except for Bursting Swords. But Bursting Swords with the wound buffs in PvP is just so high value that this will make your APOCs out of this world. So you go down this worthless tree just to get Bursting Swords and also link up to Death Rot, Festermite, and Unholy Assault. Unholy Assault, of course, unnerfed with 20% damage buff in PvP, so that is just a fantastic burst option. You can Unholy Assault into APOC and do a 1-2 punch that is remarkable damage. Now you get your APOC, big wound burster, your Magus of the Dead, that will be extended and will buff you with your tier set. Army of the Dead, which will summon a Magus. Short APOC for those big chunky bursts that give you the necrotic wounds up to 6. You'll get the 4, and then you probably already burst a couple, or you burst a couple after, and then you've got your necrotic wound debuff on them. Super Strain is just free damage, and it also, of course, works with Plaguebringer, and then works with Morbidity, which also works with Unholy Blight. So now you have 4 diseases for the 8% damage every time Unholy Blight is up, and then a permanent 6% damage. So that's all pretty much non-negotiable. You get the Plaguebringer for the, like I said, disease dam, pad dam, really good right now. AoE Death Coil and Death Coil damage is also extremely good because you're going to be firing these off 1,000 times per game. And again, Death Coil was just buffed in the recent tuning patch. Death Coil Dot scales off of Death Coil damage, which does a ton. And Sun Doom just gives you the Doomburst procs, which is a staple PvP talent now. And that's a pretty standard build. I think I saw it all last season, and I will be seeing it again this season. Pretty much every component of it got buffed. The wounds, the Death Coil, and the Frost Fever, which is the pad damage from Super Strain and Plaguebringer. Something that's notably absent is Clawing Shadows. Clawing Shadows, they would say, well, if wounds got buffed, then you would want to burst them at a range with Clawing Shadows, and that's totally fair, but you have a way to do that already with Doom Burst, and Death Coil itself got buffed. So those hits are going to be so spicy. You don't really need extra ranged wound bursting. You've got short APOC for wound bursting, Death Coil that bursts 2 wounds, and then you're not that easy to kite. You have 2 grips, 2 Death's Advance, chains, stuns, blind, right? It's very difficult for them to permanently get away from you, so Scourge Strike value is still plenty high. So yes, that is missing from this build intentionally. The other thing that's missing is Ebon Fever. Of course, both of these are choice nodes, so you have to choose one or the other. And Bursting Swords with the wound buff that we just got in the PvP tuning pass just, I think, edges it out a little bit. But you absolutely, if you're playing a rock comp in 3s, maybe Afflock Unholy, I've actually seen that and it seems really good. But if you're playing a rock comp, Ebon Fever still has, especially with Plaguebringer, of course, still has very, very high damage. So when I say this is missing because I'm not saying because it's garbage. I'm actually saying because I just believe that Bursting Swords with that spike APOC, 4 wounds, all bursted, all buffed by Bursting Swords, all at the same time, that's really, really high value. But Ebon Fever, if you are in a a solo shuffle with a lot of rot, if you're playing a rot comp in 3s and you just want as much pad as possible, Ebon Fever will absolutely provide that. You'll sacrifice some burst, but you'll gain a lot of sustain. So clawing, I think no, but Ebon Fever, absolutely yes. Depending on what you're playing, you can swap this around. Remember, there's a lot of different situations that can arise. Either you get random comps in solo shuffle. So it's not that one is just always strictly better than the other. It's that this is, I think, the default build. And when you're playing rot, you switch. Okay. I over-explained that. I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. But there's the build. And of course, these will be linked in the description below. So you could just copy and paste it and not listen to me at all if you want. Let's go to the other one. All right, so let's move on to the next build now. I called this one hybrid, but it's so close to the other one, it could really just be one build is Defile and the other one is simply missing Defile and nothing else. I don't know, but I still have to explain this one because it's drastically different in what it does despite only moving 2 talents. So let's talk about it. So I wanted to get down to Harbinger of Doom. It makes sense. Sudden Doom procs more, but it also gives you more Death Coil damage on the Sudden Doom procs. More Sudden Doom procs means more Doom Burst, which means more bursted wounds. Wounds got buffed, Death Coil got buffed, all from the recent PvP patch. So everything that just got buffed is amplified by Harbinger of Doom. More procs, more free damage, more free wound bursting, more Death Coil damage. It's crazy, right? It's a great talent to have. But it's really hard to free up talents in this build. You could see everything is integral. I mean, this entire line is integral. Of course, you want to go down to Super Strain. Of course, you want to go down to Unholy Assault. That's like 20% dam and free APOC right after you press it. I mean, wow, duh. And then it seems like you really want to get out of this row, right? Replenishing wounds, pestilence, they do nothing, but you can't because the most integral talent as part of pretty much any build, 20% to all wounds or Ebon Fever, so unlimited pad damage, is right here smack dab in the middle. So you actually have to go down this line to get this one. And then Magus is your tier set and APOC is APOC. I mean, you really struggle to free up another talent. But it's actually okay that I give up exactly Defile and Army because this build synergizes with having to give those things up. And here's what I mean by that. Death Coil bursts wounds. Short APOC bursts wounds. So if you have more Death Coil procs, you are bursting a lot more wounds all the time. You might not have as much option to the spike of Army of the Damned, but you will be getting more double coil procs because Sudden Doom will stack up to 2 charges, which is burst, which is 4 wounds from Doom Burst, right? So in actuality, giving up Army of the Damned is supplemented by taking Harbinger of Doom. And Defile, what is Defile really good in situations where you're stacked, right? Where people aren't moving very much, where people are standing still in a pile, in a Defile, getting cleaved. Well, if you're not fighting that, then getting more Death Coils makes total sense because Death Coil doesn't need any of those things. It is a ranged wound burster that's instant and doesn't have any positional requirements. So effectively, I'm assuming you're getting to what I'm saying here, but if you want to play against melee cleaves, if you're in a solo shuffle lobby that's very heavy into melee or stationary casters like Shadow Priest, maybe even some lock into melee, like they'll stack on top of each other and you'll cleave them with Defile, you can run the Defile build. But if you have a mage and a hunter and, anything else that's just too slippery, Windwalker and DH tend to be slippery melee. So if it's a DH paired with a mage, you're never really going to get a Defile, right? That's crazy. He's going to Fel Rush out. The mage is blinking, right? So you can actually give up Defile reasonably and then give up one more talent, get down to Harbinger of Doom, and have the hyper-juiced Death Coils and not feel like you're losing too much. It's not nothing, but you get something really heavily out of it. So again, Defile, locked in place, double melee, stationary caster, Shadow Priest lock, hybrid, mages, hunters, slippery, right? Movement. Kind of makes total sense. So yes, I just changed 2 talents, and those are all the builds I'm giving you, but they really do have different purposes. In the last lobby I played this hybrid build. And I went 5-1. It was streamed, and that was my 2400 game, but also we're about 2550 or 2600 MMR now, so I should be able to push a little farther in my streams that I will be doing all week. The reason I say all that, though, is that this isn't just conceptual. This is the build I played. So if you play it, I'm washed. You should have no problem getting the same results. Okay, so those are the two unholy builds that I recommend. I talked about this choice node, and I talked about that choice node. We will go to the PvP talents because they are pretty iconic by now, integral to the build. Doomburst I've said 75,000 times, so I think it goes without saying that this is non-negotiable. 90% slow, 2 wounds bursting on one of your biggest ranged damaging abilities. That's an every time pick. Necrotic Wounds has been nerfed, but it's still a huge chunk of healing and a stackable Mortal Strike. You will still always run this. Now, Strang is the only one that you can kind of switch out. Strang still has really high value in healers. Strang doesn't DR with almost anything. Obviously, only other silences, which is Priest Silence, Hunter Silence. There's not a lot of them, right? We're kind of running out of options right there after Priest and Hunter. So having a off DR 4-second instant CC, that is at a range. It's not a big range, but it is at a range. And you have grip to grip them in if you want to grip Silence because it's off the global. That is all really good. So I am a huge proponent of still running Strang almost all the time, but you have options. Bloodforged, if you are in a heavy physical lobby and you just can't stay alive, this will help you stay alive. It just says that it will, because 20% wall to physical damage is that. Remember, a lot of melee have magic damage. Survival does. DK does. I mean, this is like a warrior and windwalker, and you're just dying every round only. Maybe marksman as well. They have explosive shot, but they also have aim shot and rapid fire, and that is a huge chunk of their damage right now. So let me hover back over it one more second here. This is a windwalker, fury warrior, arms warrior, marksman hunter kind of thing. Don't be foolish and run this into any melee, because DH and DK will laugh at that, right? So there you go. Just if you need it as a quick option, Necrotic Aura is if you are trying to pad as hard as possible with exactly Aflock on a Holy DK. But maybe I would still use Strang. It does DR with his Backlash. There's another one. The UA Backlash is a silence, right? So it's very possible you just want to pad as hard as possible and you go Ebon Fever Necrotic Aura. How cool would that be? And finally, the only other thing worth anything is Necro Bargain, but you would only really want to run this with the short APOC spec, so you can have super short APOC. It gives you Crypt Fever, which does scale with maximum health, so it would be at its all-time highest value right now. But what it's crazy, it's actually mostly used for, is removing your pets so Fire Mage can't Living Bomb pad off of them and subsequently kill your whole team even easier. So Necro Bargain instead of Silence. Again, higher health pools makes Crypt Fever more valuable. Really short APOCs means very frequent, big bursts of damage. I still almost don't recommend it over Silence in any situation except for getting rid of pets to stop, and this is true, stop Fire Mage Living Bomb from slaughtering your whole team. You also kind of have to not press army against Fire Mage. I know those, I just kind of shoehorned those in at the last second, but if you queue into a Fire Mage and you see Living Bomb as 50% of his dam, you'll start to get a feel for what I'm saying. Okay. And the last thing of my guide, I've probably already talked too much. I don't even think I'll go over this very often. We've been running all the same integral talents the entire season. I haven't even switched this yet. So let's apply it. The grand finale. Here are the general DK talents. You go down this line, you grab Blind, you grab IBF, you grab Short IBF, which I just grabbed for more immunity to stun and more damage reduction. You get AoE Chains, just so good for peels, and you go down this line to Empower Rune Weapon. You go down this middle line and get all the AMS mods. You get Zone if there's magic build damage, and if there's not, you can do something like this. You do have the frustrating thing of grabbing crit instead of Short IBF, but in a lot of solo shuffle lobbies, you'll have some rounds that are over in a minute and a half. I know you've had them, so maybe that doesn't feel quite as bad as it looks. But Wraithwalk is an option for, let's say, okay, you don't want to run Zone because it's Hunter, Warrior. What else do you need to do against Hunter and Warrior? Get out of Roots, or Kite the Warrior. Wraithwalk, Zone doesn't help you at all, but Wraithwalk does. So you do have to make a frustrating drop on Acclamation here, but you get 1% more dam from this talent and you get your Wraithwalk. Not something I would recommend very often because this line feels a lot better and there's a lot of magic damage in the game, so you'll probably end up running this most of the time. I go down this right side and I grab Lichborn Wall. I know a lot of people grab longer range grip, which is totally reasonable. It's more important for Frost and Unholy, but it's still extremely good for Unholy. It gets the healers out of position. It gets kiting mages or hunters right back to you. 10-yard range is ridiculous when you have double grip, but I swear by Lichborn Wall. Again, a lot of people come to me in the DK Discord and they say, I can't live. I have survivability issues. Lichborn Wall gives you a 15% wall that you never would have had. It extends the duration of the wall that it's now giving you, and it gives you a longer duration on immunity to CC and leech that Lichborn gives you, which is more healing. Because you do a lot of pad damage, and when you have a lot of leech and a lot of pad damage, you actually get some chunky healing out of that. So I stand by Lichborn Wall. I think it has a lot of benefits baked all into one, and it can be very useful in a pinch. But again, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. If you want a long range grip, you just right click, left click. So that's the whole line. Now I have seen people dropping things down here because they're so nerfed in PvP, but I'm not super hard pressed to get anything else. Empower Rune Weapon still has a ton of rune generation. 5% haste isn't too shabby. It's off the global and it works directly into your Unholy Assault Burst. So still has value. Ebon Limb, it doesn't grip, but it still does damage. It does grip once or twice to help set up decent blinds as Unholy, or just disrupt people. It can limb casts, it can limb aim shots, right? Aim shot is very easy to disrupt. I keep mentioning Marksman Hunter because I just got buffed and they do a lot of damage to DK. So if he's casting a sniper shot and your limb pulls him in and then you grip him again and then you pet stun him, oh my god, you just stopped 3 aim shots in a row, he's hating you. And you're going to want Rune Master anyway because it's 6% strength. So you can drop certain things here because they're nerfed in PvP and just get more utility, but I didn't for a single round, and we got the 2600 MMR, so if that's what you're after, don't feel like you need to drop those things. If you like the extra oomph that A-Bomb Limb pulling everybody in and Empower Rune Weapon giving you faster globals and a ton of rune generation gives you. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's all the DK talents. That's the 2 Unholy builds I've running, all the gear, all the stats. It feels sad to wrap this up. I haven't done one of these in a while. Rotationally, I have my beginner guides. Gameplay, I will be making additional videos, especially when I get my full fire package because I'm so excited to show that off. I swear it's going to be good. So stay tuned for that. But this should give you all of the basic tools you need to ascend in rating this season. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for watching.